We need to move straight on to our next speaker, who is Alessandro Adriani from Bridge Alliance. Is Alessandro here? Ah, good, great.
Is it on? Yeah. Good morning, everybody. I'm not Alessandro Adriani, and more importantly to me, I'm not the CEO of Bridge Alliance. I'm Michael Brecht, heading up the Enterprise and M2M unit in Bridge Alliance. Yeah, and I hope that's the only deviation from the expectation of the presentation, the presenter. Before I introduce Bridge Alliance, which I think is useful as not all of you might have heard about us, let me tell you what I'm not talking about. Not so much talking about the what. The what are the hockey stick slides you saw the last days, billions of devices. Asia, I mean, M2M market in Asia Pacific by 2020. Asia is big, we all know that. 70% of smart cities will be in Asia. 62% of connected homes will be in Asia. 40% of connected cars, again, in Asia. You all know that, and I think it's more stating the obvious. I mean, more people living in Asia than outside of Asia. With rising income level, this market will grow. I think this is all more a given, stating the obvious, and you saw a lot of these slides over the last couple of hours, all the very ambitious and bullish hockey sticks. So I want to talk about the how, not the what. The what are the billion devices. The how is a bit more three trends which we see already today, which will impact how this, how we get there, how this big market opportunity bears fruition. These are the trends we see every day. When I say we, as a Bridge Alliance, so again, what it is a joint venture, so it's not one of the popping up consortium, as was just my predecessor presenting. 10 years in business. It's a joint venture of 37 mobile operators, with the last additions of China Unicom joining the family. 37 territories, Africa, Middle East, and Asia. And when I'm talking about Asia and M2M, I'm referring to the 17 members or 17 shareholders making operations every day in Asia. So in markets from China with China Unicom, Airtel of India, SoftBank, Japan. So as Angel said this morning, very different markets, from emerging to very sophisticated markets like Korea. So that's what I say we. When I say I mean, as you can see, it doesn't really need a PhD to figure out I'm not an Asian. So I've been doing the most of my professional career in Europe. So I think that, I hope that it will help to put everything I say today a bit in perspective of the majority of the audience here, which I think is predominantly from Europe and a few from US. So what are the trends we were seeing? It's a big shift, and the ASEAN Economic Community, I mean, that's a political macro statement, and what I want to say, it's more an embodiment of what's happening. And what is happening? I mean, at the end of this year, the Asian Economic Community will come true in December 2015, talking about 700 million people, $3 trillion US dollar GDP. But as I said, that's 10 countries in Southeast Asia. The point I want to make, the point in case here is, that's just a symbol for it, is Asia is very complex to operating in, but we see a lot of that the barriers between countries are getting reduced. It's going to be easier to make business across Asia. Easier, but also it's more a prerequisite to gain scale, to ramp it up across the various countries. And we do see that. We see that today, our customers, multinationals and local multinationals, asking for one fit deployment across Asia, being from emerging Vietnam to sophisticated Japan. So this is certainly something which we see today, and with the placement of Asian community and more of this sort of development, this will certainly drive the approach of have a carpet deployment of IoT. The other big trend is 4G. I mean, you all in this room, I suppose, have a 4G device. However, I think it's fair to say that Asia is really at the cutting edge of it. So 60% of the worldwide LTE traffic is generated out of Asia. First commercial deployments of LTE, LTA, VoLTE roaming, really companies like South Korea Telecom of South Korea, CSL of Hong Kong, they are driving this. And to make this a bit more tangible, you see comparable markets, South Korea and UK, they are sort of comparable population size, GDP on purchase power parity. 92% penetration as of end of last year, 4G LTE devices in Korea, 20 versus in the UK, and traffic-wise, 4.5 times more traffic in Korea. So having said that, how does this impact LTE, a bit M2M? A bit more stats here. As I said, Asia is really at the forefront of LTE. What we see, and we again are operators who have commercially in the market for a few months, few years on LTE. We see a change of all the metrics you usually have in a network. Throughput is average throughput per customer 10 times higher, 3 times higher usage, 7 times higher peak rate, latency diminished to a tenth, all that. So how does this impact M2M? What it is what we see day by day is it creates a certain perception for application developers, meaning it's a bit like a law of nature. If there is capacity, it's going to be eaten up. So we see applications which have been 2 years or even 18 months ago being narrow-banded, just adding features, not necessarily always super efficient because capacity is there, adding features. So the narrow-band M2M IoT application somehow is overtaken by really data-hungry, capacity-hungry applications. That's coming from the consumer side. We see that in the M2M application, there is just no tolerance for latency, no tolerance for any bottleneck in the network. To make it tangible, or more tangible example, I mean, that's a chipney. For those of you who have been in Manila, that's a semi-public transport kind of a service. That's how they look from the outside. That's how they have been looking from the outside forever, or at least forever, how long you can trace them on Google pictures of them. So that's how they look like. That's how they looked like last week when I was in Manila. But what's changed with LTE is different. And these guys have been using, as I said, semi-public, it's private, but serving a bit of as a public bus service, a lot of track and trace services to mesh up their service route. So these days, it looks like this, more like the cockpit of a space shuttle. It is just an example, dash cams are really, the hottest M2M application currently in Asia. Dash cams everywhere, and so that's the chipney you saw from the outside, from the inside. It's a dash cam for the inside, a dash cam for the rear, a dash cam for the front. It has in-car entertainment. So that's what I mean. Particular video is getting onto all sorts of M2M applications, remote surveillance, not thinkable these days in the most Asian markets without video security, as an in-car aftermarket, video, all data-hungry applications. Third trend on that, so you have a growing harmonized market, data-hungry application, and Angel has shared some of the examples from his markets as well. And you have a change in tide of regulation. So I think when you, particularly in this room, and you're a customer from Europe or an operator from Europe, you think Asia, you think, okay, that's not a big deal. I chuck in my SIM card, I ship the asset to Asia, and it has been doing good business for a couple of years, and hopefully it will be good business in future, and all the traffic is very welcome by our members. However, what we see with the growing volume now, because M2M IoT is coming to a tipping point, it's a bit of a change of background or how regulator and authorities look at it. So I just mentioned a few points, data sovereignty. In the last 18 to 20 months, most of Asian countries have renewed or released data privacy acts, being very concerned about who has access to what data. The data should not leave the country. Obviously, in the roaming case, it always goes back to the host operator. Who can manipulate the data, what data is stored. So all this has really surfaced in the last 18 months, the concerns about it. It's not a real clear answer to that, but enterprises and government authorities get more worried about it, particularly worried, again, if data goes back overseas. Permanent roaming, I touched upon that in a second. The third point, taxation. It's also an interesting point. I mean, I think there is no government in the world, maybe exception Monaco, Liechtenstein, who is not greedy for tax. Permanent roaming, there is quite some tax implementation in M2M deployments in Asia. There is taxation of IMSI, taxation of SIM cards. So if there is a big volume deployment coming from outside, we have seen cases where the local authority, the local tax authority thinks that's actually tax evasion, because you deploy 10,000 assets in my country with 10,000 SIM cards in it, but you don't pay the tax on the SIM card, the tax on the IMSI, and so forth. So from that side, and that's usually, as we all know, the most forceful side of the equation, tax money involved. So government's authority having a careful eye on that one. Permanent roaming, again, I mean, being here in Europe, the initial, reaction like a dog of Pavlov, you think international business, you think roaming. The main takeaway is it's pretty unclear if permanent roaming is allowed or is not allowed. When you look at our members the regulatory authority in the markets our members operate in, the vast majority doesn't have really a stance yet. In India, the TRIA, the regulatory body, is calling for expertise. It's hearing what they should do, and that's going across Asia like this. But so that's a permanent roaming. But if you have a bit of a broader view on that, meaning not just a line item of roaming, but things attached to it, again, who is the taxation on reselling? Can I resell? If a track and trace device is sold in the Philippines with a roaming SIM, who is allowed to send an invoice? Who is allowed to collect the money? Do I need a license to do that? Because de facto, I'm selling mobile connectivity by proxy. I have a license by proxy. So if you take this equation, then we roughly come to the conclusion that already today, around 30% of the markets in Asia will not enable permanent roaming or M2M solutions based on roaming, given everything in equation. So the three trend. Oh, sorry for that. Another point to make is permanent roaming. What we see is, let's be clear. I mean, in London, it doesn't matter if you are on BT, Vodafone, O2, or whatever the brand names of the remaining operators will be here. I mean, the network is pretty much the same, as good as I see people shaking their head, but I mean, give or take, networks in Europe are pretty much the same. In Asia, it's still a big differentiator. I mean, we talk about countries like Indonesia. Indonesia is a third longer than the US, have a couple of thousand islands to cover. We talk about India, continent on its own right, obviously. Australia, big land masses to cover. So network is still a key asset. And in our members, other operators invest millions and billions and billions in spectrum and kit. So network being a decisive factor, particular for M2M, assets going to remote areas, you want a network which you build and invested in. A foreign MNO, mobile operator coming in, roaming, or even a local one being part of an international group, using using another SIM card, allowing national roaming or an external one coming in roaming, dilutes this USP, this unique selling proposition. Because he will hook up on your network. He can say, you know, I'm with the best network, but without having that investment and pretty much diluting the go-to-market. Yes, the visiting operator gets all the traffic and makes a commercial living out of that, but nevertheless, the go-to-market is diluted, and we see operators not wanting to do this, not wanting to have this key market asset taken away. And this is an example from one operator. It is not one of our members, so sorry for that. It's always easier to point out of the tent than inside the tent. It's Telstra of Australia, which went out this year publicly in saying the default setting so far has been, yeah, we don't care about roaming so much, we get the inbound traffic revenue. However, they will, starting this year, the default setting is permanent roaming is banned. They will disconnect the devices, enforcing big volume incoming roaming for dedicated agreements, or actually trying to get customer ownership of themselves. So we see that trend clearly in the Asian region. In summary on that, so you have a market, and again, the Asian economic is just a symbol. You have a demand for deployment across Asia. You have soaring data usage, and a legal environment asking more for local deployment. The top one region deployment, again, says, let's do roaming. That's the easiest. It's one SIM card, one infrastructure to integrate. The two latter ones, the data usage and legal environment, is rather limiting roaming due to cost and technical reasons. So that puts our members a bit in a dilemma, what to do, how to balance, and how they see to go forward. Just to share it with you, what we thought about how to tackle this dilemma is to create one complementary multi-local M2M platform. It's quite a mouthful. So, but what it means is the complementary is, I mean, there's all the local infrastructure which will remain as is. Local SIM management platform, local AAPs, that's all there. But there is a very proliferating segment of the market asking for this across Asia deployment. So we said, okay, the way to tackle the dilemma between roaming and local is to have a platform which sits besides the local deployment and which is virtualizing the core network. So what it, a few minutes? So what it means is, I was told to hurry up. So what it pretty much means, obviously, the radio network stays where it is, but we have one virtual core network, meaning one HLR, one GGSN, so one network managing the M2M connection, enabling one API to integrate with from the customer side, one dedicated billing system and PCRF, meaning policy setting, and which then at the end enables a one SIM card solution, which is one SKU to develop. To make it a bit less telco jargon, I tried my luck to being a cartoonist. So what it pretty much is for the ones not from the telco side, is a particular M2M asset gets built at the point of manufacturing. One SIM card of our members, just to pick one, Singtel, gets deployed into the asset. The asset is exported, permanently exported, so not driving over the border for a short time. It gets detected and it gets localized, in that case, to Indian regulation, to Indian content policy, and all the local environment, particularly on regulatory, where the data goes, what content is allowed to see. That's a key topic. So to wrap this up, to bring this home, that's how we see we can tackle and accelerate or propel the growth in M2M, to have a hybrid solution between pure roaming, which again I think will be over time more and more more difficult to execute, and a local one, which is obviously very cumbersome to go country by country. So our 37 members came together and say, let's tackle this dilemma or challenge with this particular solution, giving the customer one integration, but still have a local deployment. So Asia Pac in 2020, I mean, it's future. Future is always hard to predict unless you create it. And we created this to propel and to come to the what, to the billion of devices, hopefully in a more smooth and more commercially viable way for all of you and certainly for our members. Having said that, thank you.
Very good.